She was just about to fall back to sleep when she heard the door to their room creak open. She opened her eyes, but didn't turn around because she knew it was Aunt Nisi coming to tell them it was time to wake up. She would peek in on them at night sometimes. Sometimes she would come in and make sure they were covered up. She remembered her mother used to do the same thing. Her aunt was standing directly over her bed now, just watching them. I don't know why I bothered to get single beds. You girls always end up in the same bed by morning. You two remind me of Vet and Net. They used to do the same thing, she said as she kissed each girl and told them it was time to rise and shine. As the girls stretched and slowly rose to a sitting position on the bed, Denise walked around their room, opening the shades to let the sunshine chase away the darkness. Then she inspected the clothes laid out on the back of their vanity table to make sure their uniforms were pressed and clean. Once she was sure they were ready for school, she would remind them that breakfast would be ready soon and not to dawdle. During this morning ritual, the girls would look at their aunt through sleepy eyes and wait patiently for her to leave the room before rising off the bed and heading to the bathroom. By the time they were awake and ready to wash up, Vet and Net would have already taken their shower and were in their room dressing. The four girls usually didn't see each other until they all came to the table for breakfast, which was all right for the four of them since they still all preferred to remain in their neutral corners. They had all been living together for 6 months now, and although they were starting to get used to one another, they still kept their respective distances. Denise regarded all this with quiet patience, knowing that in time they would all warm up to each other and soon the house would be so noisy with chattering kids she would long fondly for the good old days of peace and quiet. Denise didn't leave the room after inspecting the clothes like she usually did. This morning, she seemed to linger longer than usual as if looking for something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She looked at the girls on the bed and in a mood that was at once both disturbing and comforting, she sat on the bed between the girls and hugged them to her fiercely. Denise was always hugging the children. She was a firm believer that hugs, kisses, and affirmations of love were daily doses of medicine that every child needed, and she was more than happy to accommodate. Her mother always told her she was a hugger and she loved passing them out wherever she went. Although she hugged the children often, she didn't usually stop and sit on their beds early in the morning before they washed because she was too busy trying to get everyone up and out of the house on time. But this morning, Denise felt the pull of the Holy Spirit, urging her to stop and take a little time this morning to show these two young ladies some love. She knew they would be puzzled by her action, but she always obeyed the Spirit, knowing there was a reason that would be clarified later. Come here, you, she said as she pulled little Chrissy onto her lap and planted a kiss on her forehead. How did you ladies sleep last night? Good, they answered in unison, looking into each other's eyes with a knowing look, a look that did not go unnoticed by their aunt. I'm glad. Are you ready for a day of learning? I am, answered Chrissy with a little too much enthusiasm for Mimi's taste. Chrissy loved school and never got tired of talking about it. She seemed to have forgotten all about her nightmare and was loving the attention she was getting from her aunt. She had laid her head back against Aunt Denise's chest and was telling her about the puppet show they were supposed to see today in the school auditorium. Smiling and nodding at the bubbly child, Denise sensed that Mimi also had something to share, but would not be as forthcoming as her little sister. What about you, Miss Mimi? Are you ready for another day of learning? The question was simple enough, and Denise wasn't really expecting to get the same reaction she had gotten from Chrissy, but she wasn't ready for the response she did get. As tears filled her eyes, Mimi quickly turned her head away, hoping her aunt hadn't seen. Chrissy, sweetie, why don't you go on down to the bathroom and wash up, okay, honey? Okay, Aunt Nisi, she said as she hopped off her aunt's lap after giving her a big kiss. She was just about to ask Mimi if she was coming when she saw the tears that had started falling from her sister's eyes. She stopped and looked quizzically at her sister and was about to ask her why she was crying when Denise hurried her out of the room. It's okay, baby. Mimi will meet you in a little while, but right now, she and Aunt Nisi are going to have a little talk, okay? Chrissy didn't want to disobey her aunt, but she was hypnotized by the tears falling from her sister's eyes. It's okay, Chrissy. I'll be there in a minute, said Mimi, trying to smile through her tears, not wanting her sister to worry about her. Not completely sure, but taking her word for it, Chrissy slowly walked out of the room and headed to the bathroom. Chrissy loved her big sister. She always took time to play patty cake with her, help her with her homework, comb her hair, watch cartoons with her, and even read to her. Chrissy thought she was the prettiest girl in the whole wide world, and she wanted to be just like her when she grew up. She knew as long as her sister was around, she never had to worry about anything because she knew Mimi would do anything for her. She didn't know what she would do if she didn't have her sister, but more than anything, she was glad she had her sister to stop the nightmares that plagued her night after night. When they first started, she'd ask her sister why she was having such bad dreams. Trying to make her sister feel better, Mimi had told her that the nightmares would soon stop, but they hadn't. As a matter of fact, they seemed to be getting worse. She even talked to her sister about telling Aunt Nisi about them, but Mimi told her she didn't think it would be such a good idea. She told her that her aunt might think she needed to see a shrink and have her put in the hospital. Don't worry, Chrissy, the nightmares will stop soon. I'm here for you, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Chrissy was glad to have her sister there for her, but she still wished she could tell Aunt Nisi about the bad dreams. Somehow, she felt that if Aunt Nisi knew about the dreams, they would go away. She thought about telling Aunt Nisi without Mimi knowing, but dismissed the thought as soon as it came into her head. She knew her sister wanted her to depend only on her, so she decided to keep her nightmares between them. The only thing is the nightmares seemed to be getting worse and worse, and she didn't know how much more she could take. Bedtime used to mean a story from her mother and then a big kiss as she tucked her into bed at night. She would cuddle up to her favorite doll and drift into the sweet land of sleep. But since the nightmare started, she dreaded bedtime, and no matter how much she and Mimi said their prayers and read happy bedtime stories, the nightmares would always return, and it was always the same. A big white man was walking towards her, grinning, and some of his teeth were missing, and his eyes were bright red, and he was pointing at her and telling her that her mother was dead and she was never going to see her again. And then his face changed to her father's face, and he was saying he never wanted to see her again. And he started laughing and laughing and laughing, and then he changed into her mother, and she was crying and reaching for her, and then telling her to run away and don't turn around and just keep on running, and that she loved her, but just keep on running. And when Chrissy started running, she heard footsteps behind her, but her mother's voice told her not to turn around and just keep on running. But Chrissy did turn around, and she saw that it was the big white man again, and his teeth were yellow and green, and blood was dripping from his hands, and he had snakes coming out of his hair, and he smelled like throw up, and he was running after her, and he kept saying he was going to get her, and he was getting closer and closer and closer. And that is when she felt her sister's arms around her, and she could hear her whispering in her ear that everything was going to be all right. When she realized she was not in that bad dream, but was instead safe and warm in her bed with her sister right next to her, Chrissy would calm down and go back to sleep. And that second sleep always turned out to be a peaceful sleep that took her into the morning.